So for example, like triage, documentation, prior authorization, which is a very kind of written process with a lot of business process that can all be reimagined with agents very, very quickly. And it's happening now. We are delivering some of that, but it extends this possibility without having to do a lot of modernization. But now, more than ever, you don't need to invest in tons of money to modernize your systems to get the value. You can start embedding AI and be in a thoughtful way, start to scale the processes end to end.
Hi, my name is Demetri Panici, and I'm a content creator, agency owner, and AI enthusiast. You're listening to the AI Agents Podcast, brought to you by Jotform, and featuring our very own CEO and founder, Ida Tank. This is the show where artificial intelligence meets innovation, productivity, and the tools shaping the future of work. Enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the AI Agents Podcast. In this episode, we are interviewing the CEO of Zyter TruCare. Sundar, how are you doing today, Zider?
Great to be here. Thanks for having me. Doing really well.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you for making the time on the show. Would love to hear a little bit just to kind of get started, kind of how you got into the world of AI.
Sure. World of AI. So I would say way back when, donkey years, I was really good in math. And luck would have it, I got into a group that was doing computational modeling in MIT in physics and material science, and so that's how I got in to really thinking about how do you have an hypothesis, how do you really model that, and how do you simulate real world results, and then either through the models or digital twins, and you either prove your theory right or wrong, and it has led me to a deep belief in like what is explainable. You could luck into a lot of different results, but unless you really had a basis to prove your theory very clear way, it was not useful, right? So my earliest exposure in AI was really you know exposure to explainability. If the simulation couldn't explain its reasoning, it wasn't useful. And um and and then a lot of different business experiences since then. So I got into consulting, and during COVID, I've done a lot of work in healthcare, and we were building behavioral and epidemiological models to simulate COVID progressions using digital twins of U.S. population, but also the science of the models. And again, the repeated lesson was, how do you? It's not really. There's a lot of issues with data. There's a lot of issues with um, how do you really simulate the problem? But most of it, in order to get adoption, was an explainability problem. We didn't have a data problem. We had an explainability. The lesson really stayed with me. And, and then I've done a lot of consulting for Fortune 500s in digital transformation. And, the crux of how do you draw business value from any technology, not just AI. Because when you look at it, Dimitri, there's a lot of massive tech spend that goes on. Right now, it's the wave of AI, but the last 20 years, there's a lot of tech spend and, ERP, CRM, RPA. But, while it's not this, while you can't dispute that consumer B2C technology evolution has really helped, right? Like we use iPhones, our ways of life are very convenient. But on the business side, it's quite not the same, right? There's not as much value that's arrived on the business processes. And so it led me to have a deep kind of belief that how do you solve for business process debt? And how do you solve for broken workflows? And not just from how do you embed AI? AI doesn't fix broken workflows, it magnifies them. So that's what led me to get to where I am, which like the most complex of industries, healthcare, and Zyter TruCare services clinicians as they hope to achieve their mission in serving their patients, right? Consumers, us. So we are an AI company that is really our mission is to drive outcomes, not just features and functions or just point solutions.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very fair comment about the workflows and how if they're bad, they do cause problems. Practically, they don't just get fixed with AI. Can you kind of dive into that a little bit more, especially with what you guys are doing and maybe how your solution coincides with that issue?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are a few things before we get into our solutions, even like one of the things. So look, I mean, it's undisputable that AI is gonna is kind of the technology of our life, right? And it's gonna be one of those shifts that's very profound. But if you see in the past for something that's happened quite the scale of this, and the lessons from history repeat itself, right? If we take away the buzzwords and all that, when you look at it, like let's go back in time for a little bit so we understand how this problem originates and how we can solve it. Like take electricity for instance, right? So when electricity came about, I went research for 3 decades. For 3 decades, the productivity improvement didn't happen. So there was a big buzz. 30 years plus, nothing changed. Nothing
No
changed.
shoot.
I'm not saying it's going to take 3 decades for the AI value to arrive. I'm just
No, but
saying.
that is a crazy thing. Yeah.
So, but why did that happen? And, I think that this is the productivity paradox. A lot of people have studied it, but the way I internalize in my brain in a more simplistic way is, what happened is that these early factories that were set up to, for steam engines and all that, they just swapped it for motors with local power distribution as the kind of the gist of how they laid out the factory floors. And so when electricity arrived, they didn't redo the process end to end. They just put electricity into the same floor layout, right? And what happens when you do that? Of course, there are no gains in productivity. You just flowed electricity through a bad process, right? And it takes hard work to reimagine the process. And it took Toyota to arrive a lot of years later to introduce really reimagined workflows with distributed cells and flow and human machine collaboration and real, versus this assembly line thinking. And so transformation didn't occur from adding power, it comes from re-architecting the workflow, right? Just to anchor the point I was trying to make. And I think we are in a very similar moment here, right? Everybody's waking up thinking about like, hey, how do I add AI to my workflows? That's the wrong question to ask. It's like, how do I really think about solving for my outcomes given what AI could accomplish, right? If people had asked that question in electricity until Toyota did, nobody did, and then you could have gotten to different productivities. That lesson repeats itself, right? Personal computing, PCs existed honestly before Apple, but it weren't really accessible, right? Apple designed it for humans, so it's more intuitive and visual and more personal. And so then adoption happens, right? So you have to reimagine the workflows. You have to really plan for humans working with the technology to, so it's working for you, not the other way around, right? And then you have to create trust, right? I think cloud, we've seen a lot of spend go through the cloud in the last few years, but cloud existed, but enterprise didn't trust cloud. And, I think AWS came along and built a trust layer through security, compliance, transparency, and all that, right? So that, technology could shift. So my point about AI is like electricity, you have to reimagine the work. Whatever fancy terms we use, most people say transformation, embedding AI, work on use cases, all this stuff, but they are not fundamentally asking how to redo the work. It's hard, right? Because these have been built up over decades. And like PCs, you got to figure out how do you deliver on a more human-centric kind of adoption, and then how do you make it trusted. So I think back to how do we see that play out with our solution. So first of all, a little bit about Zider. We serve 45 million members in healthcare. Our core platforms, provide utilization management, care management, population health management. So anything to do with managing the cost of healthcare, where clinicians and nurses are trying to manage a population, help people direct care, etc. Our platform can do that, and with deep expertise in clinical workflows. But what SymfonY, which is our agentic AI and our sort of AI workflows do, is the same thing, principles I was talking about from the age of electricity, which is how do you create a modular orchestrated system of AI agents that are not just solving one-off use cases, right? If you take a current process and embed, hey, I can do just document summarization here. I can do some automation here. I can do a chatbot here. It's not going to help. It's only going to add to the tech debt and the business process data end to end, right? Maybe at best, someone gets a bigger bathroom break, but it's not transformative, right? And I think AI can be helpful, it improves some user experiences and gives a little bit more productivity, but that's not fundamentally anything different. And it would be the story of electricity and no productivity gain. And so what we're doing is more multi-agent systems that orchestrate. So that's what SymfonY is. It looks at the end-to-end workflow and how stakeholders are participating. And how do you really do that? And how do you really keep humans in the loop? And so the decisions are trust.
Hmm. Yeah, that's I really like that story. I thought it was pretty intriguing. So thanks for that. I'm gonna keep that one in the back pocket in regards to the adoption stuff, because I feel like a big topic right now with AI is, you know, AI exists. There was that whole article this summer that dropped that was talking about how, I don't know, what was it, like 90% of companies that
Yeah,
were implementing AI? Yeah.
the value
Were
gap.
not,
Yeah.
yeah, the value gap's big right now. So, how did you, I guess, personally, um, find your way into this like intersection of AI and healthcare, and like what motivated you to want to tackle these complexities of the healthcare sector specifically?
Yeah, it's a great question. See, there are, what is it? Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, shelter, whatever. Like fundamentally, you know, as people get more sophisticated, you can get to consumer industry to get different kind of goods or products in B2C. You can have luxury industries that cater to different things, but everyone has got to have a better experience in healthcare, right? Everybody wants to live longer and live a happy and healthy life. And unfortunately, though, given this like complex way, here we are, right? We've arrived at a situation and a system that's very siloed, that has a lot of siloed in the sense of data sharing is not quite wide, right? People have trapped data, unstructured data in different enterprises. Regulations and privacy concerns are foremost, which is very understandable, right? But and modernization of these old technologies and the digital cores are going to be very significant investments that people don't have the money to make. And we are here post COVID at the enormous affordability crisis. I mean, incredible affordability crisis. If you project any of these projections, you cannot afford the way that the healthcare expense is growing, right? And so then what do you do? And consumers are not having fun or great experience with this. So somehow we've arrived at this, but everyone is unhappy with it. But I do think the was that bad idea. Not ideal, but exactly. So, but so how did I arrive at AI in healthcare? Like I talked about, like, I've been in healthcare for last 25 years. And what strikes me is this first is like the problem statement I stated on 90% plus value gap. I'll start there and get into healthcare. That's a problem statement that is quite wide, even beyond industries, that the technology spend doesn't really re-architect the business process is my fundamental kind of way of internalizing why the value hasn't arrived. We haven't been able to reimagine the business processes contemporary to what the technology could do. So it's not the technology that's the issue, it's the human imagination and adoption that's the issue, right, at hand. And then you go deeper into healthcare, it does arrive with this kind of regulation complexity of the current state systems, etc. And so past technologies have solved problems in use cases, right? Like I've worked on use cases where you go do collect data, you show the causality, explainability to solve the specific problems, and then the real world hits. and it's a very small problem in a very complex ecosystem. So you don't have any meaningful impact, right? Like it's very small and micro scale. And so fundamentally, then, if we were to say, okay, forget about this, let's look at something that's more end to end in healthcare and how could this work? Um, Somehow, then, the answer is not like complex to understand. It's really, how do you get the best of data to understand what's the predictive next step, and how do you get AI agents to help humans take these actions in a very timely and meaningful way. That if you model that kind of a system, it'll be probably, we've done different kind of scenarios, it'll be probably one fifth the cost of what we're doing and much better customer experiences, etc. Then the question is, how do you get that? How do you really, what's the future where agentic AI efforts that you can get there? And I think I'm very excited about something that's very distinctly different about this current AI movement, which is, you know, this power of cognition that can be embedded in every node, right? So it's not like you have to define all the business rules in every step of the process. So when you start to rethink this process end to end, the cognition you can place in different nodes through the agents and agentic AI and the multi agents coming in, it can solve problems within kind of defined boundaries more autonomously. And so then the question is, how do we so for example, like triage, documentation, prior authorization, which is a very kind of written process with a lot of business process that can all be reimagined with agents very, very quickly, and it's happening now. We are delivering some of that, but it extends this possibility without having to do a lot of modernization. There is still a lot of burden on, like, how do you make sure your data is ready? How do you make sure you have the right architecture for safety? But now, more than ever, you don't need to invest in tons of money to modernize your systems to get the value. You can start embedding AI and be in a thoughtful way, start to scale the processes end to end. And I think that's exciting for healthcare because there's tremendous amount of value to be unlocked from that.
No, absolutely, and I definitely think there's a definite need, as you mentioned, Maslow's hierarchy. There's a definite need for something like this. There's a definite need for AI to help out people in the healthcare industry, because practically speaking, I mean, I've heard, I'm sure you've heard, I've heard there's just a lot of people struggling with kind of the costs and everything. I run my own business. The premiums aren't crazy because I'm younger, but like as I, get older and have kids, like it's gonna be wild. So everyone's struggling with the care, the costs, etc. So I think it's a very good place. And I've interviewed a couple different people, and I do think this is where the intersection of AI could be really valuable, industry wide, that I don't think a lot of people have necessarily considered in the general day-to-day conversations about things, right? I think most people are focused on, and rightly so, like general business applications and, emailing back and forth and like task management and like content output and stuff. That's kind of the main things that you notice. But I think healthcare is really, really where it could make some universally good waves for people. So just to kind of further that thought a little bit more, what are you guys practically doing to helping out in this, just to get to dive deeper into like your product and what you guys do so that everyone get more of an idea?
Yeah, great question. Absolutely agree. So let's take an example to bring this to life, right? So, the industry has a very common process called utilization management or prior authorization today, right? So what happens today is, to the extent that the available information is there when a member goes to a provider or a doctor, and it can be approved, it can get approved. But many times what happens is that there's a lot of back and forth between the insurer or the risk bearing entity and the health system or provider or the doctor's office, and for getting an approval before the service could be performed, right? So what happens is they send either fax or sometimes electronic, but many times fax is still, that's reviewed by a clinician or a medical director, and they have to match eligibility requirements. They have to understand if the benefit is covered. Then they have to look at medical necessity to apply guidelines, like evidence-based guidelines, to see if this is actually necessary care, because a lot of times the care that's being administered is unnecessary and it creates more complication, more spend. And so they have to go through the decisioning on that. And then when you go through that, there may be information from the medical record that's missing, right? That is required to, then they reach out to the provider's office. And many times there's not, like, sometimes maybe there's connectivity with the HR that you can message them electronically. Otherwise, somebody has to call the doctor's office. And the doctor's office, because they're in the middle of looking at somebody else, so they're not able to answer them. So they have to return the call. Then you get the missing information. You have to go through the process to redo the workflow. So it takes time, it adds administrative burden. And meanwhile, the patient or the member is waiting for all this. Look at now what AI can do, right? It's not just these kind of like very straight through scenarios, all these complex scenarios with peer reviews and data going back and forth and reviews that need to happen. When you look at this end to end process, what we are able to show is that bringing in 40 agents, not one or two, 40 agents working on behalf of one clinician, they can streamline all of this, right? And when they do this, when the AI is working in tandem with the human, with a lot of responsible AI layers built in, the human is still getting, so they're reading the document, surfacing the first summary. They're saying whether it's eligible or not. They're saying whether its benefits covered or not. They're already applying the clinical criteria guideline to suggest what might be the. They're saying here's the missing information. They're actually fetching the missing information from the EHR and doing the redetermination on the fly. They're notifying it's end to end, right? So all these edge scenarios, when 40 agents can work on behalf of a clinician, it gives an enormous lift to the clinicians, right? So it's the question is not about um, how do you really replace the clinicians. The question is about how do you give relief to the clinicians, right? And with all this administrative work that's happening, so they can actually apply it to either counseling or looking at care guidelines and accepting and practice at the highest of their license, right? So that is Dimitri, that workflow I just described is 80 to 90% more efficient, and the turnaround times improve by like multifold, and the patient gets what they need right away. That's the
Yeah, I think
kind of
that's
thing
really
we need to
important.
embed.
I think that's really important to call out. That percentage, one, crazy, very good. Two, what does it kind of give clinicians like time back for? Because I've heard different things on this. Would love just to kind of hear more context on that perspective from you.
So here's the thing: if in this, first of all, I think if we step back, clinician capacity is a pretty significant issue in the industry, right? We need more clinicians, and we need more clinicians focused on helping members stay healthy, not just overwhelmed at taking the volume for an event that comes in, right? So there is not enough um, care management, population health management going on. So if you know that this needs to be done anyway, and we are able to get it automated, and the clinician agrees and get it done right away, right? Which is what right now the system is dragged down on, right? The system is set up for just being compliant. All the resources take up the time to just do that. When you automate all that, you're going to be having a lot more compliance. But then now you can really engage with the members or the patients with the care management programs that was always been the intent on. And you could actually think about how do you really help them stay healthy, and the incentives will be also aligned, because then you'll spend less, the insurers makes more, and the provider systems make more, right? So because they're spending time with that, right? I'll give you a very real example, like my personal example. um I have intermittent back spasms, right? So I go try to, when that happens, I'm kind of like shocked, right? I can't do anything. It affects my productivity quite a bit. And to get the approval, go get to see the PT, I have to drive somewhere, do all this, right? And then it's one session. And then I have to be compliant with that session, which, like with daily life, etc. I get a, but now I actually am using a digital therapist. It's fantastic. It there is a care team in which an AI digital therapist is part of this. There's a tablet that comes with that, right? And there is a physical therapy therapist also as part of that care team that she messages with me back and forth, right? But I mean, in this whole interaction over the last 2 months, probably she spent 15 to 30 minutes with me because all the other work is being done by the digital therapist that's part of that care team and with the tablet. So it is monitoring, it's keeping me compliant, right? I'm doing set of exercises every day, and it's looking at my posture, giving feedback. It's taking my feedback, preparing care plans, giving it to the physical therapist, and she's redesigning the program based on these inputs that we're having. And look at how many such patients that physical therapist probably able to support because the tablet and the digital therapist giving and leverage for that physical therapist, right? So that's the mindset we need to get in. I'll give you a more simpler example to kind of nail this down. We used to go to whatever checkout lines, and we used to stand in checkout lines. There used to be a time we used to stand in checkout lines for physically a person to do the checkout, right? Now the philosophy is there are self-service checkouts, but there's still a human in the loop. Most of these self-service checkouts, when you see, there's a person that's watching if there's an issue. If there's an issue with the system, they'll come in. So this is the mindset we need to go with care teams, right? So it becomes a team. AI agents are part of the team, and nurses, clinicians are part of the team. Many times, so the patient or the member, the caregiver or the nurse or clinician, and AI agents are part of one team. And in this team construct, many times the AI agents might be in the front communicating with the member, with the nurse being informed or watching it, the human nurse or clinician being informed or watching it. Sometimes it might be a live interaction that the human person is having with the member with AI enabling them. So it's this kind of mindset we need to go to, and then but they're always looking at each other and we're all watching, right? So I think that's a very highly leveraged model. And then, going back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, then how many patients can be like, I like how many folks are having physical pain that can get this kind of support, right? I think that's the way to untap the potential of the clinicians to its fullest needs aligned to members' goals.
Yeah, I mean, truly, I feel like this would maybe make the adjustment for the clinicians to feel like they're giving healthcare more than health catching up. Because I don't know, any doctors or nurses personally, that's what it feels like they're always trying to do is just play catch up on different things from an administrative perspective most of the time.
Absolutely. They are trying to stay ahead with the cues and just play catch up. And the extraordinary administrative burden that we place on these humans is just enormous, right? And so it's not just a cost perspective, it's a burden that actually comes off their shoulders. So they're actually supported, is the way I look at AI.
Yeah, they feel like they can do their job rather than do things that enable them to be able to do their job. It's a very interesting like catch-22 they kind of get put in when they become a clinician. I will say something that it's not a concerning thing to me, but it is a curious thing to me. How has the market kind of adjusted and handled things in regards to like compliance with this, right? Like how does that old chestnut gonna go?
It's a great question. It's a great question. So first of all, trust is not. So we did a study on this as well. I'll talk about it in a little bit. So look, I think what clinicians first of all, it has to be set up in a way that the human is in the loop. Because otherwise, we did a consumer survey and study as well, and we did a study of clinicians as well. What consumers are telling us is not that they'll reject the AI. They're saying they need the explainability and they need a human in the loop. Then they're willing to accept the benefits of an AI driven system. And from a clinician perspective, for this to be compliant with, just not just regulations, with privacy, etc., which has to be very highly secure, safety, data sharing is utmost concern, and all of that, the infrastructure exists to do that. But then more than that, even when the human is in the loop, for the clinicians to trust the recommendation from the AI, there are three things that matter. This is what the study showed. right? One of our PhD data scientists, along with some health system collaborators, did this study, and the study was simply looking at clinicians using AI and what drives overrides, right? So, low confidence predictions get overridden 99% of the time. And when you show the explainability, so transparently how the AI came to that conclusion in a very simple way, and show why the result is to be a high confidence one, the overrides went down to 1.7%, 99% to 1.7%. So it's a completely different picture on overrides, right? Yeah, it's published study. And so what it was saying is that doctors and clinicians weren't rejecting AI, they were rejecting uncertainty. And so the way to solve this problem is first put clinicians always in the loop, human in the loop. So AI is not autonomously deciding, it's recommending for the clinicians and making the administrative burden less for the clinicians. Then you have to work on really explainability, which I started with that, right? In anything from research to anywhere, if it's totally a black box, nobody's going to trust it. No matter how good it is, not going to be trusted. So better systems that shows the rationale and the reasoning for the decisioning and what's the evidence base against the decisioning, and rendering that in a very simple human experience so they don't have to go digging and doing their own research to find the explainability, very prominently explainability. And the third is, how do you get the confidence factor of the recommendation very high by showing that multiple models converge into the same recommendation, and that it's a groundability, that it's repeatedly asking with different prompts the same question leads to the same answers. When you show those three things, the clinicians override go down, the compliance is very high, and they can do their job. So I think that's the key in making sure we're creating very trusted systems that can be effective in doing what it does.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I do think transparency is key in any context, let alone this one. I think that to me is perfectly fair. Since your platform is already using AI to automate workflows, where do you kind of see AI agents heading in the next few years? Right, obviously AI agents right now are doing really valuable things for companies that are effectively using them. Regardless of what that stat says, I know for me, they're doing a lot. Granted, I'm in a bubble. I run a tech podcast about how AI agents work, so I get it a little bit more. But the practical implications of where AI agents are going in the next few years, what are your thoughts on that?
I think we are in the cusp of a pretty significant singularity or dislocation from an AI agent perspective, honestly. Um, I'll get back to healthcare in a second. There's an article that a few researchers from MIT, etc., did about what they call it as a coalition singularity. I'll simplify it. Essentially, businesses have a lot of processes and workflows because of friction or coordination or decisions that need to be taken, right? That's the fundamental reason it exists. And the cognitive skills of these AI agents and how fast it's progressing means that the cost of this kind of friction and coordination is going to go very quickly to zero. What I mean by that is, and we're seeing this, the point I was making on looking at that end-to-end process and prior art and looking at it as like it can be 80%, 90% efficient in making the same decisions where much more instantaneously. Think about it, like extrapolating that to all these complex processes we've created in all these businesses with agentic AI, and the kind of cognition that's coming in is going to take those processes to be much more like closer to a cost of zero. And all these workflows are going to get reimagined very, very fast. So the orchestration of work is going to happen very fast through agentic AI. And even if I assume there's going to be no progression of cognitive and reasoning skills from where it is today, which is an extraordinarily modest assumption because every 3 weeks something comes out that beats something else. Even if you assume, yeah, it still is going to happen because because something fundamental has happened, which is that you don't have to define everything a priori in terms of business rules for these agents to understand. And this reinforcement learning from human feedback is going to progress in a scale that we've never seen before. And these processes are going to get to closer to cost of zero. So businesses that really adopt on this reimagination journey are going to create some extraordinary value props for consumers. And I think we're going to see either very low price points and different products coming out, or extraordinarily significant value proposition that consumers haven't seen or businesses haven't seen come about when these kinds of processes take hold that can be autonomously executed at a cost of zero.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. You know what? I mean, just to speak to it, the flagship models that exist, right? So software engineering is a big thing, obviously, in this whole component right now. Gemini 3 Pro was released recently, but then, we all knew Opus it was going to be the flagship the second it released an update. And then a week later, it releases an update. I don't know if you saw, they reduced their pricing significantly on the new flagship model. And I think it kind of is funny timing that you mentioned that, but it seems very apparent to me. Things are going to continue to get cheaper. Things are going to continue to get better. And it's like only a matter of time, like you're saying.
Yeah, you brought up a great point there. So like even the more on just that problem of coding, right, and taking that kind of use case in a problem set, and what has been like, I think Gemini 3 and this tool anti-gravity for as a coding base, and you know but even there are other tools that are out there. I think this can't, even in the last 9 months, 12 months, the concept has been this kind of idea of a co-pilot that's helping, or a chatbot that's helping people code, right? That was the concept, but that concept itself is getting broken because these newer tools and these advances coming in, you can define. Of course, it's initially prompt driven in the sense that you give it a problem statement, but then it's able to solve like recursively and create products against that problem statement, versus this kind of logic of just a copilot kind of helping some human create. So I think this level of autonomous kind of decision making, of course it has to be done in a way that it's responsible and managed, and the end output is stress tested. But that kind of productivity gain that's very real, even from the last 2 weeks announcement, is just extraordinary.
Yeah, it is. Where do you think your company's vision is right now to kind of end up? Like, what's the final, or not final goal, but like, what is the goal for the next 5 years to accomplish, and with the ethos of your company?
Look, I mean, we are very committed to a single point, which is we want to help businesses be part of this reimagination of the workflows. We want to help create the Toyotas that took advantage of electricity, right? Not the ones that kept their processes the same and did some, just poured electricity through their current layouts. And I think that is going to fundamentally drive a pretty significant revolution on the global economy. And the way we do that is through SymfonY and the sandbox and a tool that we provide for businesses to be able to really help reimagine that what they do in a way that they can learn with us. The platform provides the ability to learn, create your own agents, create your own different kinds of workflows, and get to the best outcome possible, right? And that's a continuous journey, and that's the continuous journey we are with our clients on. And healthcare is a fantastic place that we started, but it's not just in healthcare that we have the aspirations on. We are already helping clients with like anything regulated, anything that's very complex, anything that has multiple stakeholders, anything that has a lot of friction, which is a lot of where the global economy and the dollars are trapped. They're going to get reimagined, and we are providing the platform to create multi-agent workflows. And it could be that there are multiple advances in AI that takes even generative AI to this next stage, and it could be world models, it could be whatever, right? But it's undisputable that the learning curve of AI is going up very fast, and we are providing the platform to keep up, businesses to keep up, to reimagine their work using how you bring in the AI to really drive outcomes. And that's kind of our vision, and that's going to stay, and we're going to learn. It's a very we are keeping up with what are the advances that are coming up, and very quickly figuring out how do you get that from the labs to the real world processes in a very responsible way, right? And how do you give the sandbox for clients to build their own agents and really redo their workflows?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. One last question, kind of to make it a more fun one, because I do like to ask this question kind of as we get towards the end of episodes. What is your personal favorite tool when it comes to just general AI use for yourself?
Um, I like ChatGPT a lot. I have to tell you, it understands me a lot,
I
and
must admit, I like it.
it's calm. It's everybody says, like, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of, it's very tried and a lot of usage goes, but like what I'm amazed at, I use all kinds of tools, but the level of personalization that's happening on ChatGPT, I'm always very excited. And I'm like, I'm a father for two daughters, and so I have a newsletter called Student of Life. So it's all about AI leadership, but also parenting. And how do I mix these things? You know, it's like bedtime stories to parenting advice to it's gotten into a level of personalization that's very, very, it's very shocking, and I think it's a fantastic tool.
It is. No, it absolutely is. So with that being said, just to kind of close that out for everybody here, please let everyone know where they can find what you guys are doing over there at Zider, and any other final plugs you'd like to end the show.
First of all, thank you for having me. Fantastic discussion, and kudos to what you're doing, because we need more of this out there so people can understand what and learn from each other. And it's not like you can get it from reading a paper or something, right? This is a whole movement that's very amorphous, and we have to learn from each other. So thanks for doing this. I'm a big fan, and yeah, I think to one quick message. I mean, AI won't transform your business because you bought the right tool, right? It will transform your business because you've learned to redesign the system around it. And that's the primary message we are aspiring to help businesses with. You can find more about what we are doing at Zyder.com. And you can find a lot more about our product called Zyter SymfonY, which is a platform that can, integrate with existing digital tools and help people reimagine the process end to end and agentify your workflows. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you for spending the time here today, as well as I appreciate everyone else who had the chance to watch. If you like this episode, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and also to both you here, Sundar, and everyone else listening, make sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to help the algorithm boost everything they're doing over here for healthcare at Zider. That is Zyter.com. That's Zider.com. Thank you so much. We'll see you in the next one.
Thank you. Take care.